serial killer and law-abiding citizen. For the majority of us, it is difficult to understand how a person can murder somebody in the evening, then go to work the following day, only to return home to dismember a corpse on the kitchen floor. Within these pages, Dennis Nilsen explains, as he understands his situation, how he is able to commit these murders without such damage to his self-perception as to render himself incapable of maintaining a semblance of normal life. In that regard, the reader may be particularly interested in two specific points: how he describes his relationship with alcohol and how he describes his victims. Alcohol was a key feature in the life and in the offending of Dennis Nilsen, although he was adamant that he was not an alcoholic. Indeed, he vehemently disagreed with any suggestion that his rehabilitation plan in prison should feature any kind of work related to alcohol management. Yet it was with the aid of music and alcohol, most often Bacardi rum, that he would slip into a fantasy world, frequently playing out in his mind the details of his interactions with dead bodies, both in rehearsal and recall. Alcohol only served to embolden him in reality, in approaching men and in the moments before their murder. It was at once a coping mechanism and a key component in his crimes, as the reader will learn. It was only with the numbing effect of Bacardi that he could begin the grisly business of his first dismemberment. When we remember that serial killers are largely conformist outside their offending, alcohol was a means by which he was able to loosen himself from the bonds of conventionality and cross the boundary into necrophilic and murderous fantasy and behavior. While categorized rudimentarily as a necrophile, the descriptions he gives of his interactions with the bodies of the men he murdered reveal that to be a rather simplistic moniker. In fact, these memoirs reveal Dennis Nilsen not as a necrophile, but a necro-fetishist, someone who is aroused by contact with corpses. More than sexual contact, his words reveal the post-mortem interactions with his victims. They watched television together, bathed together, and ate meals together, behaviors that mimicked what he had so much missed out on in his adult life, a fulfilling relationship, albeit on his own terms. It is in that vein that the method of victim disposal should be considered. So often, in accounts of serial killers, the more lurid aspects are fixated upon with no purpose other than voyeurism of behavior which fascinates but repulses in equal measure. Dennis Nilsen himself noted that he would have quite liked to have kept certain parts of his victims, not so much as trophies, but as mementos of the relationship he shared with that person. While victims were treated with relative affection and warmth after death, when they were used as props in a relationship fantasy until being dismembered for disposal, in retrospect, he would try to believe that he had performed an act of charity in their murder, relieving them from the suffering and misery of their lives. More broadly, when quizzed by detectives, he would note, either consciously or subconsciously, what he perceived to be the negative characteristics of his victims: those who had been in social care, those with mental health issues, self-harmed, homeless, prostitutes, those who had been in trouble with the police, drug addicts. In short, whether intentionally or not, he was denying the worth of his victims. Over 60 years ago, such internalized thoughts, particularly when verbalized, were labeled as a technique of neutralization, a part of a group of linguistic means by which an offender is able to maintain a positive self-conception and protect themselves from self-blame, or blame of others, by rationalizing their actions and their crimes. Although subtle, it is such commentary that only he could provide, which gives us an insight into how Dennis Nilsen was able to commit such crimes without arousing suspicion and without breaking under the weight of guilt for having murdered a dozen men. As the listener will learn from these memoirs, a confluence of factors met to form Dennis Nilsen: the social and legal disapproval of his homosexuality during his early life, the long shadow cast by his grandfather.